Hi everybody, it's Colman here. The team at Safefood, MyChild.ie and the HSE have asked you to send in your questions about talking to children about treats. And we've had loads of questions coming in, so I'm going to try and get through as many as I can. Lorraine asked how she can get her 2-year-old to back away from the treat press, and others asked about handling meltdowns when treats were refused to children. It's important as parents that we feel we have permission to say no to children. This is important not only for their health and their diet, but also for them to learn about self-regulation. And even as young as children as young as 2, they're already creating relationships with healthy foods and treat foods. And it's important that you shape that relationship as best you can. But saying no can be hard, and sometimes we will have meltdowns, we'll have a reaction to it. What I'd be saying to you is, you have to go with that. Although saying no might be unfamiliar at the beginning, the only way of getting over unfamiliarity is by doing it time and time again. And soon saying no to treats will become culture. And what happens then is the child ceases to ask for them because they know that they're only a certain amount per day, etc. But that initial period is difficult. What I would be saying to you is, don't give in to the meltdown. The issue around if a child finds out that by throwing a tantrum I end up getting the treat in the end, you're reinforcing that that's a way to achieve what they want. What you need to do is be calm, be consistent, and be predictable. And over time, your child will get used to the amount of treats that they are permitted and they're allowed. And after that, they'll stop asking for it outside of time. They won't be hovering around the treat press, and they'll have a good idea of what and when they are able to have their treats. So initially it's going to be difficult because you're going to have to be a bit unpopular for a while. But always remember, being unpopular doesn't mean that you're getting it wrong. In many ways, it's an indication of you getting it right. Mairead wants to know how to help children not see food as unhealthy and healthy. And this is a really important issue. Food is not necessarily bad or good. What we have is bad and good amounts of food. So it's really important that children they're allowed to have a certain degree of sugary foods or foods that we would deem to be not the healthiest, but that we don't overdo that. And so the idea is around portions. It's around how much is enough. And I think from the point of view of, as parents, children look to us to decide they're enough. And we regulate things all the time. We regulate their sleep, we regulate their temperatures when they're sick, we regulate their appetites, and we regulate their relationship with treat foods as well. And so the issue is about portions. It's about how much is enough and how much is too much. And of course there will be days when we do overindulge, albeit play dates or parties or things like that. And it's important to let those things happen because nobody can live within a regulation life all the time, and nobody wants a child to live a donutless life for the rest of their life either. But it is about reminding them that this is what we would recommend, this is what is enough, and this is what you need to be healthy. And it's not about good and bad, it's not about demonizing any types of foods, it's about trying to teach them about how much is enough. And the second question from Charlotte was about disordered eating. And this is eating when you're distressed. And this is common because when a child is hurt or tired, or maybe they fall over and hurt their knee, we might look to the treat food as a way of comforting them. It's a way of, in many ways, distracting them from the pain or discomfort that they're feeling. But what it is, it's an association that this is a kind of a sugary response to distress. And we have to know that when children are small, that's what we're doing. We're hardwiring their relationships with treat foods. And so they'll associate maybe comfort eating as a means of comfort. And we have to be mindful of that that's not always our go-to. There are many other ways of making a child feel comfortable when they're distressed, albeit that a hug or some time with them, or to distract them, or to even play with them a little bit. So let's not see the treat as the first thing we reach to. And by doing that, you'll create a whole selection of ways in which children can respond to distress or being upset that doesn't always involve food. Joan asks, how do we help teens make better decisions without worrying them about weight? And this is really important. Our food discussion has to be health focused, not weight focused. It's about giving us energy, it's about giving us fuel, it's about giving us nutrients for our brains, for our muscles, for our movement. And the idea is for us to feel better in ourselves, to have better well-being, to have more energy. It shouldn't be about BMI or fitting into clothes or that we're fitting any sort of image. So the discourse and the narrative around how we talk about food always has to be about health, not about weight. And by doing that, we create a link between teenagers and wanting to be healthy, and for even younger boys, perhaps it might be about fitness, it might be about being able to be fitter and stronger. It's not necessarily about thinner or looking better or fitting into any particular clothes. And as the adults in the room, we have to role model that. It's about parents not talking about their own diets all the time, not body shaming their own weights all the time, and not having conversations around how dissatisfied we as the adults in the room are with our bodies, or how guilty we feel when we have a treat. It really is about normalizing it and making it about health focused, not weight focused. Nick Talbot asks, if children are overweight, how do you say no without making them self-conscious? And again, it comes down to the narrative around health. It is about trying to sell and pitch the idea that if they eat better, they'll have more energy, they'll sleep better at night, they'll have more pep in their step during the day, they'll have more impetus and motivation to do things. And it's really trying to sell that idea that, and again, you know, if we want to do some exercise or movement, when we're doing that for the first time, it's oftentimes, it feels like something we have to endure, it's not something we're looking forward to. But when we go for the walk, that's when the endorphins are released. And oftentimes we say, when I feel better, I'll do something different. But oftentimes it's when we do something different, we feel better. And so the idea is really, and for children like that, it's important to do it with them. You know, a lot of teenagers I talk to, and I ask them, what's the difference between being nagged and being encouraged? And being nagged is when mom says, you should go for a walk, whereas being encouraged is, will we go for a walk today? And it's really about getting that balance right as the parents in the room, that we get on board and help them to find better ways of being active, of being sensible around their energies, and making more sensible choices. Erin wants to know advice about explaining what's important about restricting without getting into body shaming. And again, a similar question to the last one. It is about health, it is about fitness, it's about energy, it's about sleep. It's not about weight, and it's not about inches. And so from the point of view of, as the parent in the room, you set the tone of that culture. So you set the tone around what the benefits of being active might be, the benefits of eating well might be. And if you're role modeling that and you're encouraging your child or teenager to come along with that, that's the association they will make. I understand that it's difficult in a world of social media where a lot of the emphasis is around food, weight and shape. Our culture at home is still really important. We still have a huge influence over how our children and teenagers understand their relationships with food. So don't underestimate your power in terms of influencing and shaping that culture. How to encourage children to eat healthier food rather than pizza, chicken nuggets and chips. And what I'd say to you as a parent, maybe you're the chef in many ways of the menu of the house, and so you decide what you cook on certain days. Of course, there's no problem with having chicken nuggets and pizza the odd day here and there, and if maybe mixed in with other food types that are perhaps on the more healthier side of it. But as the parent in the room, you set that tone. So you decide how many days a week you're comfortable with somebody having more of the chicken nuggets and pizza stuff, and how do you intersperse that with the other more wholesome meals that you might have. So you decide that. What I would say is that we shouldn't have children deciding the menu. We should decide the menu and they should eat. There's another issue around, many parents kind of worry that children will starve if they don't finish or make an issue. And that oftentimes means that meal times become a battleground. And by default, as parents, we might be actually creating more of a problem than we are solving. The more, when it comes to food battles, less is more. And I mean that in terms of the discussion. The more you make about the issue, the more control you give that child at the dinner table to determine the temperature of the room and the conversations around it. Oftentimes less is more when it comes to insisting on finishing meals or making a big deal about certain things that you want children to eat. If they're hungry, they will eat, and if they're not hungry, they will eat later. And I think from the point of view of, we need to kind of calm down on our maybe militancy around that, and ensuring children have the diet plan that we want, or ensuring that that happens. But from the point of view of how do we decide how much pizza and chicken nuggets are enough? As the parent in the room, that's your decision, and you decide that maybe 1 or 2 days a week is fine to have that, but that they're getting the other nutrients through maybe the veg and all those other fruit and veg types of meal plans, that there's enough of those in the week too. And again, as I said before, it's not about having no treats, it's about having a good balance between the right foods and those that are maybe less right, if that makes any sense. In terms of the real meaning of treats. We got a question around this, and this oftentimes, the word treat can be a divisive one in many ways. Some people don't like the idea that it is associated with something that's involved with a reward or something that you earn or something that you get. And so, in terms of associating with food, how can we normalize treats and eliminate the reward association? That's very difficult, because I think from the point of view of when children do well, if we look at their lives, if they win prizes and things like at sports or football and things, oftentimes the prize is jellies or it is sweets or it's bars. And so maybe inadvertently we're creating a sense that food and treats are a measure of that you've earned them because of you've done something good. What that means is that when they're older, if they've had a bad day, they might go, well, I deserve to go to McDonald's or get a takeout or do something here tonight, or I deserve to treat myself. Oftentimes that's not how we should create a relationship with food. A relationship with food is when we feel that we have enough of it. And again, if we're having a particularly bad week, does that mean that we treat ourselves more? Or if we're having a good week, do we eat more? That shouldn't decide the level of treats that we have. And so from the point of view of how do you create that with children, I think it's about varying the rewards for what they do or what they achieve. It may be a magazine, it might be even time with you, it might be 20 minutes later that they can stay up that night. These are things that you can institute. That doesn't necessarily mean that the treat press is the place we go to recognize any achievement or something that our children have managed to do. And on a side, we oftentimes tend to not catch children being good, from the point of view of where you might say, if a child asks for a treat and you say no, and they accept that and walk away, it's important to acknowledge that and say, that was really wise and sensible how you managed that interaction. And I noticed that that's different to how that would have been before. And I really like the way you're able to take hearing no so well. And that will encourage them to be able to manage it the next time. So don't forget to catch your children being good. Another question here is, what do we do if children don't like fruit and vegetable? How do we get around that? Well, there's a few approaches to that. It's obviously important that children have fruit and veg. So if there is quite a protest around it, sometimes it's important to camouflage these. And this can be done maybe through fruit and veg smoothies, or, maybe, cutting up veg very thinly and putting it into maybe a bolognese or something like that. There are ways in which we can get around that. But in terms of creating a relationship with vegetables, sometimes children they take a set notion about something, like, I don't like that food. And what we do is we enter into a battle of wills about them, that we will make them like it. And that creates a greater issue, creates greater battles, and actually can make the child dig their heels in even more. Perhaps it's about saying, okay, well, if you don't like that sort of vegetable, we'll try this one. If you don't like that one, we'll try this one. And oftentimes, remember, children come round. Some children who don't eat certain veg at 6 years of age, at 11 years of age, will turn around and go, actually, I like that now. And we have to allow them a way back. Whereas if we create too much of an issue around that, we almost create a protest situation where we back them into a corner. And I would say, again, the issue is less is more when it comes to that. Try and encourage them to eat as much as they can. Try and offer them a variety of different vegetables that might suit them texture-wise, or some children like soft vegetables, some prefer crunchy vegetables, and offer them a menu of as many as possible that you can find the ones that they do like. And it's important that maybe we accommodate that. If a child is not having a lot of veg and they only like one or two, let's use those. Let's get those vegetables into them, because at the end of the day, the nutrients and getting them fit and healthy and helping their well-being is, at the end of the day, what we want most from them. What's the ideal the age to introduce treats, and how much, with all the conflicting advice out there, where should you start? I think children are introduced to treats straight off. I think when we're even as babies, when it gets to rice cakes and things like that, or maybe trying to even introducing them to solids, there are perhaps nicer solids than there are, and ones that are a bit more appetizing for children. And so right from the off, children are creating that relationship. So you start as early as possible. And I think from the point of view of, again, having that balance and having enough treats in the diet that allow them to be aware of what treats are, it's important to know that prohibition doesn't work. If you become very anti-treats, and if you have a very kind of militant way of looking at it, or perhaps very strict, what oftentimes happens is that child, when they get to the play date or when they get to the party, might overindulge because of that you're creating this kind of the forbidden fruit almost element of it. And so it's important to add that maybe that's not the right way to go. It is about a balanced introduction. But where do you start? I think from the point of view, you've got to see if where you are now, if you're a family that have overdone the treats, and we all have been through a very tough 2 years where we had very little to give our children. So the treat became something that we reached to help them to feel better, to entertain them, to reward them and to compensate them. And now that things have opened up again, we're finding it difficult to kind of rein that back in and maybe narrow that a little bit. So where you're at now is where you start. If your children are getting 3 treats a day and you're not comfortable with that, that's too much, maybe aim to reduce that to 2 next week, and maybe reduce that to perhaps 1 the week after. It is really about what is manageable for you. Families are busy places and life gets in the way. And I think if you set a goal that's too high for yourself and you may fall short, you're kind of building yourself up to be disappointed. It is about trying to make manageable steps for you that you'll feel week on week, we're making progress here. The relationship with food is better in our home. Our relationships with treats are better. Not even just that we're having less treats, but perhaps there's less energy around the need for treats, less arguments around treats, and more balance into our lives. We've gone through a very extreme time where balance has been really hard to achieve, and exercise, activity, sleep, recalibrating all of those things, and the amount of treats that we give our children is part of that process. Recalibration takes time. We have to be patient with it, but we do have to start. And for me, the best time to start is now. Start today, whatever it is. Again, nothing too exaggerated or too difficult or too high, but make those baby steps, improve week on week, but be mindful of the amount of treats that your children are having. And again, you're doing this for their benefit. This isn't about being cruel, it isn't about being withholding. Treat foods have impact on, sugar levels have impact on our children's mood, on their anxieties, on their visceral feelings, and really on their mental health. And lots of research is pointing in that direction, that our diet is really, really important to helping us cope with everyday life and everyday adversity. So by protecting your child, by getting their nutrients right, getting their activity right, getting their sleep right, we're equipping them as best we can to cope with what is a difficult and at sometimes challenging world for them. This is something you're doing for them. It's not something you're doing to them. So have the permission to manage it. Have the awareness that making the hard decisions might be the right thing to do. And if you are feeling unpopular, and if you are feeling that maybe there's a bit of a fallout in the family home, that doesn't mean you're getting it wrong. It might actually mean that you're getting it right. Best of luck with it, and I hope it goes well.